was born in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. He graduated from Dalhousie and the Nova Scotia Technical Institute with a civil engineering degree. He decided he would come west because he had a brother out here, and his brother was district commercial superintendent for Alberta government telephones. That's TELUS today. And there were still very few engineering jobs. So what he looked for was teaching, because he kind of leaned toward teaching anyway, and he liked it. So he took the summer courses at the University of Alberta, got his teaching degree, and began teaching in the rural schools. By 22, 23, roughly around in there, he was teaching in the high school at in the Catholic system up at St. Joseph's High School in Edmonton. And interestingly, about that time, my mother was going as a high school student at St. Mary's Girls' School, and she came with one of the teachers to pick up some supplies from the boys' school. And the person who had to deliver the materials was my father. It's the first time he ever saw my mother. I'm not sure what occurred for those next 8 or 9 years, but they married in 1929. And Frank bounced along in the baby bunker in 1930. During the war, we moved to Edmonton to live with my grandparents because my dad went overseas. My father, after the war, the Second War, in 1947, was told by the University of Alberta to take the remnants of the Calgary Normal School, which was now housed in the SAIT Heritage Building on the West Wing. And they said, and there was 174 students at that time, and they said to make something out of this or we'll close it. So effectively, this was the Calgary Branch of the Faculty of Education of the University of Alberta. My father was director and head of the institution at that time. The initial creation of this institution began before there were any presidents, which came only after autonomy in 1966. He was more or less responsible for a lot of the activity, the dealing with his superiors at the University of Alberta, with some difficulty at times, because there was some question about whether or not the University of Alberta really wanted a university in Calgary. And the people in the committees in Calgary who've been wanting a university since the turn of the century. In the era that he was there, when they turned the sod, then they started the construction. The people in Calgary were so delighted, and it was bald prairie. I mean, there's nothing there at all. The other side of Crowchild was just houses. And so, I mean, you're standing out in a grass field, I guess you'd call it. And all these people were dressed. My dad was in his cap and gown, and the Honorable Fred Colburn was there. And they had this shovel. It was chrome-plated on the bottom. And this is interesting. It was green. The handle was painted green. Now you think about, why would it be green? The colors of the University of Alberta are green and gold. Calgary is red and gold. Now there's a lot of people thought that should have been red and gold. U of A said there is no way, that's the Calgary branch of the University of Alberta. It's a green shovel, and it is in the archives today. Now I'm not sure if it's still green. Someone may have snuck in at night or something and changed it to red. I'm not sure, because it's a little thing, but these are the kind of little nitpicking things that would go on. There was a nail, was like on a lot of construction sites, the first thing they do, the first nail, they give it a tap and then they take it out and say, here's the first nail. Well, my dad had that nickel-plated, chrome-plated, and he had a little plate put on it with all the information and so forth. And this was all done at one of the jewelries here in town. I don't know who it was, but that was all done here, and it cost $47 at the time. And I remember that number very well. He submitted the bill to the University of Alberta to pay for this, and they wouldn't pay it because it wasn't part and parcel of the program or the artifacts that are considered to be archivable. That's the way they worded it. Now, he was so mad, he took that nail home and he kept it there until Murray Fraser was the president. Murray Fraser had sent one of the very senior people who had been here a long time, Fred Trendiak, and he came to me and he said, "Frank, we understand that there is a nail." And he said, "Do you know where it is?" I said, "I certainly do." The nail sat on his desk all of his life, right till he passed away, and it stayed there till about, it was in the 80s anyway. And my mom said, "But I think you're right, yeah, it belongs in the archives." So it is in there today. By 1960, they had two buildings. They had the Administration and Arts Building, which is the first one, and then they had the base block of the university's Faculty of Education, not the tower. And that's all there was in 1960. We had a little house over in Rosedale, which you could see, there was very few houses then, and we could look across and see his office building. My mother would wait until the light went out over there before she prepared supper, often 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Sometimes he worked till 10 and 11. There was a lot of work to do, and the staff was very small at the time. You're paralleling with the growth factor. The growth got so large with the old site there, and I mean the site was growing at the same time. The growth just couldn't handle the way that the things were evolving, and it needed more space, there's no question. And he was very involved in the preparation, the back and forth dialogue between the committees in Calgary and him, and the people in Edmonton and him. And there was always that little bit of friction, if you will. And but he loved what he was doing. He knew it was right, and he focused on that. And I think when it was all said and done, he was so proud of the fact that it existed. And now here was a building, and there was another one that came right after. His biggest disappointment was the fact that he didn't end up being the first principal. He wasn't healthy at the time. I mean, he was heading for a nervous breakdown, just as sure as, you know, the Lord is above. And his doctor told him the same thing. He says, "Andy, if you keep doing this," he says, "you're not going to make it to 65. So he says, "Get out of there and relax some." And he just decided at that time that maybe that was the wisest thing to do. So he went and stayed on as Associate Dean of Education for 1 year, just because Malcolm Taylor was new on the job. And he says, "I'm here," and there's dialogue and inter-office memos to the effect that he needed to be able to help Malcolm Taylor, who said, "Andy, I need all the help I can get here because I don't know the place. I'm not sure what's going to happen." But he says, "I need you." He says, "I'll be here." So that's what he was kind of focusing on for that 1 year. And then he took retirement, and he lived another 13 years. Whenever there was an event that was wonderful, or like something equivalent to convocation, or you know, any of those social events, he just bloomed, because my mom was also a very social person, and she lived until she was almost 100. So, you know, and she was very involved in the university with the Faculty Women's Club, and my mom and I, we developed a scholarship. There's an endowed scholarship in the Faculty of Education. We made sure that the scholarship itself is based on the practicum as opposed to high marks. Because he's from Nova Scotia, he knows what Dalhousie is. He knows what a lot of these institutions are when they've got hundreds of years behind them. Not all of them grow like this one. This one is like Topsy. It's gone almost to the point of where we haven't got room for another building. But there's going to be another building, and then another, and then another. And this campus today is absolutely nothing like what it was originally or anticipated to be. I think he would be amazed, absolutely amazed. I was in the fundraising portion of the university when I was here from 74 to 92. And I mean, what we did in fundraising, everybody was willing. And the people were so generous, almost to a fault. They were happy to support it. The community was happy to support it. I mean, let's face it, this is where it's at. This is where the action is.